The whole idea was several weeks ago, I was woke up in the middle of the night, what seemed to be at the moment the audible voice of God, enough that it stirred me out of my sleep. I sat up in the bed, looked around, nobody was there except my Scotty dog down there looking at me like I was crazy. We both got up, we walked around the house, everybody was asleep, everybody's things fine, nobody's in the house, but yet I knew someone had spoken. And I got back in the bed, and that thought hit me. Do I need to be like Samuel and take 3 times, or can I recognize the first time that God's speaking, And so I quickly opened my Bible and just sat there in the bed and started to pray and read, and began to feel God stir some things in my heart specifically for this church, Harvest Church. And we shared some of those things this morning around breaking free, what it means to break free, the process of breaking free. We looked at the story of Peter walking on the water, kind of some preliminary stuff to tonight. Tonight we want to take it a little further, but we want to look at a different place in Scripture, which is interesting because even as the guys are sharing just around Father, Heart of God, and what God is saying and doing, being all quite emotional there in the front row. For various reasons, I'm being emotional. Emotional because my opal, actually my wife's opal, but he's here tonight, well over 50 years of serving God in the ministry. And he's here tonight, and I get the privilege and the opportunity to preach in front of my grandpa. And incredibly privileged for that. So I better keep the word straight or he'll let me know later for sure. Okay. So it's an incredible honor. At the same time, have friends who I consider family in the room, a couple different friends and family in the room, who have gone through and are going through difficult situations, from children to family things, difficult stuff. And that's family, that's life, and it's real. And in no way do I want to come across tonight that suddenly you take these 3 steps and all your problems are solved. Take these 3 things and suddenly all the weights can be lifted off and you live a peaceful, happy life. Unfortunately, that's just not the way it works. As much as I want kingdom now, we know we live in that tension of here but not yet, but we want it here as much as possible. And so I want you to hear my heart in that we're trying to move forward in having more kingdom here, but wrestling, most of kingdom here is less about kingdom being here. It's already here. It's more about us working out our stuff to see the realization of it here. That's really what it's about. The more we are empowered by the Spirit, the more we carry the Spirit, the more the circumstances and context doesn't matter any longer, because we serve an impossible God, a God who loves the impossible, who loves doing the impossible. And so tonight we want to look at Genesis, and what spawned this kind of conversation between me and God was actually my teenage barista. So I've got, as I said this morning, got 5 boys in my home, 24, 12, 9, soon to be 9, 4, and 8 months. And a few more living in the house from time to time, and boys passing in and out. My dogs are both my dog. The only lady in our house is my wife. You need to pray for my wife, Vanessa, please. Okay. Lots of energy, lots of excitement, lots of wrestling, ruffling, and tumbling, lots of smells and odors around all the time, something going on, That's my house. But I have my son, Keenan, who will shoot me tonight if I tell you this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. He won't be embarrassed. He'll be quietly proud. I know my Keenan. Keenan, he'll be 13 this year. And this last year, we homeschool our boys. And this last year, at our church, we have something called Red Band Academy. Red Band Academy is the vision of our operations guy to how do we take coffee and make it more than just about coffee? How do we take coffee and bring the kingdom in to transform people's lives? And started training baristas. So we went through a work for a living program to get them work ready. And then the best of the work for a living goes into our barista academy. And then so far, out of the Barista Academy, over 100 people have found jobs being baristas in and around South Africa through the Barista Academy. We just ran our 9th academy just a few weeks ago. Every single barista in the academy this time, I think there were 10 of them, all 10 of them found jobs within a week. We got them jobs within a week. So we're changing lives through coffee, all right? Yeah, exactly, yes. It's heavenly juice from heaven, whatever. The Pope used to call it the devil's juice, though, by the way. I was curious about that. But Keenan, last August, we're having our Red Band Academy, and we homeschool, and Keenan's like, Dad, I really want to go in this Red Band Academy. I want to go learn to be a barista. That's why we do homeschool. Let's take the opportunities available to us. So Keenan goes in. I never realized how important it was, or how important coffee could be, right? Like, I'm not a big coffee drinker. I drink hardly any coffee, maybe tea once in a while, but I'm not a big coffee drinker. But in that context, suddenly my son, in a 30-day period, goes from knowing nothing about coffee to being a coffee snob. No, Dad, we can't get that coffee machine because it's not plumbed into the house. Boy, I'm not spending 30,000 rand on a coffee machine for our family, okay? But Dad, it's not going to be as good. I don't care it's going to be as good, right? Then we go out to restaurants and places, and suddenly Keenan's looking at us. What are you looking at? No, Dad, they're running that shot too long. It's only supposed to go for 27 seconds. I counted. That's 33 seconds. Are you really kidding me? You know, he's examining the coffee. He talks about the foam and the way the foam should be. No, that foam's too creamy. It's not foamy enough. It's too this. It's too watery. It's too that. It's overwhelming, the information that comes through. And then he'll taste the coffee. Dad, no, can you taste the lemony flavor with a slight hint of vanilla with a fruity flavor at the end? No, I taste coffee, boy. You know. So he's incredibly passionate about coffee now. He's become my teenage barista. He loves serving coffee. Matter of fact, he's got a job now in our coffee shop at our church and gets paid. He works every other Sunday, gets paid. He's 12 years old, got a job. He's earning his own pocket money, buying his own shoes, loaning me money when I go out for dinner, things like that, right? And he keeps accounts too. He's regularly keeping it. Dad, you owe me 350 rand. Yes, I know, boy. I know I owe you. But in that space, so now we have this coffee person in our house who is becoming quite a coffee snob. And he's making special coffees for the family. When people come over, he's making special coffees. And so I thought I was going to do something nice for Keenan. And I went to the shop one day. And I was getting some groceries. And I saw some really beautiful glass, like small little cappuccino glasses. And then some bigger ones for some other kind of, whatever kind of coffee and bigger glasses comes that way. You know, the different type of glasses. I thought, I'll get a set of these glasses. In a certain way, you can see the foam in the top and the cream for the cappuccino and the dark in the bottom, the 3 layers. And you can see the stuff. And beautiful. It makes the coffee even more fancy. It's amazing. So I come home with these glasses and look at these glasses. I want these glasses amazing. That's incredible. Look at these glasses. And Kenny goes, Dad, it's not the glass. It's what's in the glass that's important. Excuse me. But it got me thinking about something. It got me thinking that all that glass was a void, a space that had been created to contain something. It was a space to hold something. Didn't matter how nice the glass cappuccino coffee mug thing is. Doesn't matter. What matters is how good is the coffee going in it, right? Is it extracted too long? Is it burned? Is it too weak? Is it too strong? Is it too hot? Is the milk too frothy, too creamy? It's all about what's in that space that makes all the importance in the world. There's a beautiful passage in the very beginning of Scripture. And when I love Genesis because it sets out some first foundational things in terms of life and the way we live life and the way we engage life. And we can learn some things, I think, from the Father about how do we engage the spaces or the voids that we find in our life. You see, we're going to see in a moment how space was created. And as God created space, He filled that space. We're going to look at that in a moment. But at the same time, as God created space, so did the enemy. He took where God had created space and created a space within that, a separation. He created a separation, a space between God and man, and filled that with pain, suffering, sickness, disease, stress, anxiety, worry, fear, anger. He created a space, a void, and filled it with all those things. Most of us carry weights. We carry the difficulties. The difficulties of our life, we carry them heavy upon our shoulders because the voids are created and we don't know how to maintain or fill those spaces well. And we're going to look at some patterns I think we can see in Scripture of how God created space and what He then filled those spaces with, and some principles in order to maintain or fill our spaces well. So while the context of our life may not necessarily change, the pain and difficulties of life may not necessarily change, but it's okay because we know what to fill in our space. And we manage ourselves. And through managing ourselves, the kingdom flows out and love flows out. And where love is, as we spoke about this morning, fear is cast out. So let's look in Genesis briefly. Genesis chapter 1, the very beginning, in verse 1, says this, if I can read it in this light without my glasses, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. We see a space which is formless. It was void. There was nothing really there, just kind of everything around. There was no clear-cut spaces, nothing delineated. There was no order. There was just chaos. Like many lives before they find Jesus. Chaos, no order, no structure, no delineated spaces, just everything bleeding on top of everything. Relationships overrunning into each other, pain running over into my relationship, from my relationship into your relationship, my broken relationships into your broken relationships, my financial deficits into your financial deficits, my pain and suffering into your pain and suffering, my hurting causing me to hurt you. It's just one big humanity mess. But in that space, something very critical starts to happen, which gives us some indication of how we move forward in this. The very thing that we see here in those first few verses, when this void and all this chaotic nature is happening, we see God do something quite unique. Because up to this point, up to this time, people knew gods as being singular. I worship my God, you worship your God. We have 5 different gods, but they are separate gods. Here, for the first time, we see the Hebrew God describing himself as Elohim, which is a plural form of the word God, but still being singular. So it's me, meaning we. Now, first of all, you think, what are you, schizophrenic? What's going on here? Is there one of you or 2 of you? How many of you are you, really? Multiple personality syndromes? We can manage that. We got sozo stuff for that, right? We can put you back together again, okay? God shows himself in the very first few verses where the chaotic void is happening. He shows himself to the world as we. And then he describes those we's. Hidden in the verse are the 3 different we's. We see the word God created. In the beginning, God created. That word created there is the word bara, okay, or bara. It's quite a strong word, aggressive word. It's a word with impact and power behind it. It means create. There's a creative impetus, a creative power there, and God's showing himself to be a creative Father first. Then it says we see the Spirit hovering over the waters. So we got creative Father, now we see the Spirit hanging over the waters, ready, hanging over like a mother hen brooding over her little eggs, getting ready to hatch the eggs out, right? The feminine side, dare I say that, of God. See this aggressive form, this manly creative thing happening, and then this feminine dynamic happening of brooding, hovering over, lovingly, waiting for something wonderful to take place. And then we see speaking. It says he spoke, and creation happened. There was some other place, where was that? There was something else. Somebody was spoken before. Who was that? It actually said the Word became flesh. The Word of God became flesh. The creative impetus, the creative power of the Father became flesh. Jesus. John 1. So we see the 3 different forms of the Father. We see creative God. We see the Spirit of God. And we see Jesus in the first few verses. In the first few verses, we see God showing himself as 3 distinct parts, if you will, but still being one God. Now, we don't talk about this a lot in our modern context because the Trinity gets too messy. It's just confusing and messy and I'm not sure. But yet some of the more modern theological scholars are starting to say over the next 100 years, the Trinity will be the defining factor of Christianity and its impetus in moving forward. The Trinity. So what do we do with this? Is God schizophrenic? Or is he trying to show us something? So I always kind of defer back to me being a father. I got 5 boys, okay? I'm a dad. I'm a father. I'd like to think I'm a halfway decent dad most of the time, unless it's middle of the night, 2 a.m. when the baby's crying, okay? So I'm a halfway decent dad, and yet I'm a dad at home to my boys, but when I go to church on Sundays and there's 4,000 people and going through the doors on a Sunday, I'm not dad to everybody. I'm not wrestling my boys. Hey, how's it going? Let's wrestle, okay? I'm not having farting competitions with my boys on Sunday in the church. I'm going, hey, George, come, let's do it. Come on, you can do it, right? You don't do that, right? No, because you experience me different on a Sunday. I can be a father, yes, but I'm a different form of a father in church on a Sunday, right? Then I go home and I wrestle with my boys. Then later on, the boys are in bed and I'm with my wife. She doesn't want me wrestling with her. That's called marriage class 101. She doesn't want me punching her and she doesn't want that. She wants my love, my affection. But yet, am I still Adam in all those spaces? Am I still being me in all those spaces? Absolutely. I'm just showing you different forms of who I can be, but still being me. Now, why that's important is because when void comes in, when space comes in, Jesus, God the Father, needs to show himself in different ways at different times for different circumstances in different spaces. Sometimes you and I need Jesus the healer. Sometimes you and I need Jesus the restorer. Sometimes we need Jesus the redeemer. Sometimes we need Jesus the provision. Sometimes we need God the Father. Sometimes we need the Comforter. One of the greatest realizations I had this last year, we had Family Day the first week of November. We had a family day, lots of activities. We invited all the families, trying to get families to come. It was just absolute mobs and mobs, crowds and crowds of people and activities happening. And there was a gentleman that I've been getting to know over 6 months. You'd see him on a Sunday and hang out and chat and connect a little bit. And he was growing in his faith. And he'd gone through a difficult patch in his marriage, but he and his wife both were now coming to church, still living separately, but working. They wanted to get back together and working on this marriage and trying to work through the issues because they wanted to do the right things. Wonderful family, wonderful couple, had just never learned how to do relationship well. And he had brought his boys to church that day, and the wife had stayed home with her mom and dad. He brought his boys to church that day, and we'd had the whole family day, and he was leaving with his two boys. And as he was leaving, there was another gentleman behind him. It's like, hey, what's it going on? How's it going? They started chatting. And as the guy turned around, he said, hey, you're not looking too well. You're feeling okay? He said, no, I'm not feeling very well. So I'm just going to go home. I'm feeling quite sick. And he started struggling to breathe. In the moment, started struggling to breathe. And so this other gentleman quickly opened his car door and sat him down in the car door. And the two other people came and recognized something was going down. They took the two boys off and went back into the family day to go play some more games. Within 30 minutes, he was gone. A 35-year-old man, father of two boys, trying to get his marriage back in a good space. Massive heart attack. They worked on him. I got there just a few minutes after they started, just a minute or so after they started trying to resuscitate him. They spent 45 minutes trying to resuscitate him between there on the ground, in the ambulance, all the way to the hospital. This is our family day. This is my pet project in the church. I'm all family. How can you do that? How does this happen on family day of all days? And why to a father? I quickly jump in my car and make sure things are taken care of the church and follow the ambulance to the hospital and get to the hospital before the ambulance does. And I go inside and there's his wife and she's absolutely frantic, beside herself, on the floor crying. And we pray with her briefly and we go back outside. The ambulance shows up. And as we show up, they get the doctor in to say, it's been 50 minutes at that point. We're calling it now. And there's this man in front of me who I knew and began to love and encourage and started to walk a journey. No longer here, just a shell. Now we have to go inside and speak to his wife. And we go inside. As we go inside, they tell his wife, and of course she falls apart, becomes beside herself. And for the next 2.5 hours, I stayed in that little tiny hospital room, and she would cry, and she would look up at the floor. She'd look up at me. I'd be standing above her like this. She'd look up at me and look directly in the eye and almost look through me and say, please tell me, please tell me it's not real. Tell me it's not real. And everything inside of me wanted to do something to make this right. Everything inside of me wanted to take the pain away. Jesus the restorer, Jesus the healer, Jesus, please. We went through that 2.5 hours. I was done. I was beside myself as well by the end of that journey. I went home. I kind of came back to church that night a bit of a zombie, quite honestly. 2 weeks later, they traveled up here to, his family was here. They buried him here in Durban. This lady's back in our church. 2 weeks later for the first Sunday with the two boys. I see her come around the corner. In the service, I see her come around the corner of our stage like this. I'm standing down front. She comes around the corner, and we lock eyes. And I don't know what to do. Because I couldn't take any of that pain away that day. I don't know what the response is. Am I supposed to hug her? Am I supposed to squeeze her? Am I supposed to walk away? No, I don't know. I'm lost in that moment. And she locks eyes on me, and she doesn't let go. And she walks straight towards me. She puts her arms out, and she squeezes me. She begins to weep, and she begins to weep. She says, I don't remember anything you said or did that day. I just remember every time I looked up, I saw you there. I saw you there. I want to thank you just for being there. And that day, I learned about Jesus, the Comforter. When nothing you can do can make it right. The pain of the moment is too great. Jesus, the Comforter, needs to be there. And why is that important? Because you will hurt people. You will cause more pain. Maybe you got a gift in some area. Maybe like Julian, you can prophet. He can prophesy off the back of a hat if he wants to. Okay? He's got a gift to prophesy, but if he doesn't understand what Jesus someone needs, he can come into a situation. I can say this about Julian because I know he wouldn't do it. But he can come into a situation, and suddenly it's a dynamic situation, and they need God the Father. And I'm just going to prophesy. I'm going to prophesy. I'm going to prophesy. They don't need the prophetic Jesus right now. They need they need God the Father. They need the love of a father in that moment. You can come, but it's my gift. It's just what I do. We don't care about your gift and what you do in one sense. Because in that moment, when somebody's in pain, when a void has been created, when a space has been created, they need the Jesus they need in that moment. They don't need your gift, no matter how gifted you are. That's how we remove some of the weight. Because from that day, there's been no weight in that relationship between me and this family. Every Sunday, those two little boys come running. Adam, throw their arms around you. You pick them up, you squeeze them, you run around with them, you jump around with them on stage. They come down front on Sunday nights and you dance with them some. Every single Sunday, she comes and she throws her arms around and big hug and big squeeze. The relationship, there's no weight there. There's no pain there because Jesus the Comforter was there. I could have blown it. I could have ruined it all. I could have started prophesying. It's prophesying over your family and prophesying over your future. She didn't need that at that moment. Maybe in the future, yeah, she will. But in that moment, she needed Jesus the Comforter. That's why God showed himself in different ways in the very beginning, trying to help us understand, yes, I am one God, but it's important for you to understand there are different faces of me you can see. And you're going to need it when you go through difficulty. And we, as people, need it to minister to other people. We need to understand what Jesus they need. Now, what's interesting is you keep on reading, you see through the next several verses, from verse 3 all the way through verse about 24, actually all the way through verse 28, I think. All the way through, you see this creation process happening. You see this chaotic, formless void happening. There's God showed himself in three different forms already, knowing there's different faces of me according to what this earth needs. And it begins to create. And as it creates, first of all, as we see this rhythm taking place. It was evening and morning, so first day. Evening and morning, second day. Evening and morning. This rhythm taking, there's a rhythm to life. He's establishing a pattern, because in the patterns is where space begins to happen. The first pattern we see, evening and morning, the first thing he creates is light from darkness. He separates space from light and darkness. You ever thought about that for a moment? Separate, what was there before? How does light and darkness, does it mingle? It can't mingle, does it? So how do you separate it? Space. You create a space for something to take place which is bigger. So he creates light and darkness from each other. Then he goes on, he creates, it says he separated the water from the sky, the water from the land, which is actually separating sky and water together. Separating, making sky and earth. Separated space. Then the next thing you see is it goes on, he creates land and sea. He separates the water from itself on the earth and creates land and sea and separates that. And then the next three things we see is once he's created these different spaces, he begins to fill those spaces with the specific things those spaces need. So the very first thing he creates after he's created all the space, he creates stars, moon, and sun. The very first thing, light and dark. You ever also thought about, he separated light from dark, just as a byproduct thought. He separated from light from dark. Only later does he create stars, moons, and sun. Light and, where does the light come from? Maybe he is the light. Separates sky, a dark and light, fills it with stars, moon, and sun. Then he separates the water from the sky, from the water from the land, creates sky and earth. Guess what he fills that with? It tells us, the next verse, fish and birds, land, sky. Then it goes on, it says separated the water from the sea, the water from the land, separates, creates land and sea, two separate spaces. What does he fill that with? Animals and man. Each specific space he fills in succession with the specific things those spaces need to create the goodness of life. And then he creates man and woman, Adam and Eve. And everything's great and going along hunky-dory. And then we continue reading the story a bit further on. As we read the story a bit further on, suddenly the enemy, the serpent, Satan himself, in whatever form it is, comes into the picture. And he asked a few questions just to get a little space in between Eve and the Father. And then Eve goes and talks to Adam, and Adam should have picked it up. He's the dude. Come on, it's your responsibility. Lead your family well. But Adam didn't pick up the space that had been, slight space had been created. And the danger is, it wasn't the fact that space was created. That wasn't the danger. The fact that the space was created, but what filled that space was the difficult part. See, God gave us the ability to create space. I can create space in between the relationship between myself and Rich. What I put in that space determines how much weight, good and or bad, this thing can carry. If I let the enemy come in and whisper in my ear and say, hey, you know what, that Rich guy, he's clever. He's not that clever. Hey, you know that Rich guy, he's good. It's not that good. I mean, really, come on, Adam. You still got a little on top, don't you? You're not quite as shiny up there, you know? He's losing brain cells falling that place, doesn't he? It just evaporates right out, just like that. You got some cover there. It's happening, you know? You know, you could do a little bit better. You could just, come on, Adam, you could just, creating space. And suddenly I start putting doubt and fear, a bit of anxiety, a bit of mistrust. Yeah, that Rich, I know. Yeah, guys wear shoes like that. I don't know. You got to watch. You just got to be careful, you know? Guys who hug their kids like that in church. I don't know, you know, it's a bit freaky for me. Guys like that, you know, that prophetic stuff. Yeah, just. And suddenly there's so much space and so much doubt and mistrust. And now, every time I see him, I feel weight. Every time I'm around him, I'm like, I don't know how to respond here. There's tension, there's stress, the anxiety in the relationship. Because space was created, and I listened to the voice. And heartache and pain and mistrust and doubt and hurt filled the gap. We have the power to create space. That's why the enemy could do it. God gave us that ability to create space. We are to have dominion over, to subdue the earth, which means we are to delineate and understand where is our boundary, where is our territory. What is the sphere of influence that our life carries? That is our space. How do we carve out that space and carry the influence we're supposed to have? But you can't carry the influence you're supposed to have if you're filling that space with doubt, mistrust, worry, concern. Tonight in worship, one of the sweetest moments I've had in a long time, just did my heart well as I stood in this worship tonight, and I thought, there's friends I count as family, brothers and sisters, men and women that I love. You're in this space together. Everybody's doing their stuff, in their lanes, carrying their weight. This is a good space. It's a sweet space. It's a safe space. Why? Because in that gap, there's trust. In that gap, there's love. In that gap, there's honor. Most of the pain you and I carry in the relationships, because we created space and we listened to that voice slipping in, telling us, hey, he's not as clear as he thinks he is. No, he's not. He's not this, she's not that. Oh, you could do so much better than they could. You could do so much better. Careful. Watch the space being created. The very first thing, the moment you encounter any kind of space, the very first thing you should be asking, what Jesus needs to fill this space? What Jesus needs to fill this space? Is it doubt? Is it worry? If there is something happening here, hey, tidy it up. Hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm feeling a bit of tension here. Are we okay? Are you and I all right? The first thing Adam should have done, he should have went to Eve and recognized straight away, hey, my girl, what's going on here? There's some space have come in your relationship. You and God, and now me, there's something going on here. Hey, how do we clear this up? Come, let's walk this back to the dad. Let's walk this back to the father. Let's walk on back. It's all good. It's all good. We haven't done anything wrong yet. Let's trust him. We may not know everything, but let's trust him. Let's walk in faith. Was know He loves us. He's given us everything. But no, Adam, the genius he is, yeah, exactly right. Come on, let's go. And what happens? Space. Created so much space, God pushes them out of the garden. They lose the very good thing they had because they didn't manage their space well. Space is critically important. Later on, we see it with Cain and Abel. One offering accepted, one not. Some space, some tension created. The brother should have said, hey, listen, yours is accepted, mine wasn't. I need to learn. How can I learn? Something's going on between me and you. Let's tidy this up because I don't want this space here. Instead, no, I'm going to take care of this space. I'll sort this space out. I'll cut you out to cut the space out. And actually what I do is I cut you out and I create even greater gap in space of hurt and pain and sorrow. Every time you respond out of fear and anger, you're creating a greater gap between you and the people you love. Every time. What are we doing? What are we filling our space with? What kind of coffee is going in your cup? Is it good coffee? Is it extracted well? What kind of spaces are you creating around you? The Father created space. He set a principle in place that we can create space and fill it with the things of Him. And we meet with people all the time. A majority of the issues and problems you have are not with society, are not with the economy, are not with who's the president, who's not the president. Majority of the issues and problems you've got because you're not managing your space very well. You don't know what Jesus is needed in what moment. You don't know how to honor and love people. You don't know how to embrace people. We so much doubt and mistrust that we hurt. So Adam, what if people create space and they throw the junk in the pile? Well, then you push closer. Hey, there's some junk in here. What's going on here? Can you and I tidy this up? No, I want more junk in there. Hey, there's some junk in here. No, I want more. Okay, you go carry your junk. My space is all good. Anytime you want to come back in my space, we clear this junk up, and my space is available to you. I'm managing my garden. That's what we're called to do. That's how we manage our space. We manage our garden. We keep the weeds and the junk out. We keep all the stuff that destroys and tears down and rips down our garden, our space that God's given us. We keep it out. We tend it. We keep it well. We learn how to tend and keep it well. And we manage our space. And then watch what God will do. Because when you tend to keep your garden well, what happens? It becomes fruitful. It becomes so fruitful, man, we need another 40 hectares of land here. We got so many things happening. We need more space. Why is it this church is beginning to see signs of, not that it didn't have signs of life before, but extended signs of life? Why is this church beginning to see some kind of growth, something momentum, some movements are happening, some shifts are happening? Because you are beginning to manage your space well. You're beginning to manage your space as a church in this city well. And the better you manage it, the more it's going to grow and produce fruit for the lives of others to come feed on so they learn how to manage their space well. That's the word for this church. What kind of barista are you going to become? Yes, Jesus. That coffee shop is a nice little coffee shop, but I believe it's a prophetic picture of what's going to happen in this church. As that flourishes, watch this place flourish. Not because it's good coffee or bad coffee, because I believe it's a prophetic picture of what kind of barista you're being. What are you filling your space with? Why? Because in that coffee shop, it's the front porch of society. That's where you and I get to have the chats and navigate our space. That's where you and I get to have the difficult conversation because one of us have listened to a voice somewhere. We put some doubt or mistrust in there and the enemy's come into our space and I don't like the tension and weight we're carrying this thing now. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's sit down, you and I, and let's negotiate. Let's work this thing out. As that coffee shop goes, so this church will go. Because that's where you navigate your space. Because we don't talk to each other in here, do we? How are you? I'm lovely. Hallelujah, Jesus. Yes, we worship. Whole time in our head, I wish you wouldn't sing so loud. You sing way too loud. Oh, you're off tune. Shut up, please. I can't even worship Jesus in my ear all the time. Atmospheres like this, we're not careful, create space, the wrong kind of space, and we listen to the voice. Atmospheres like that coffee shop where we sit down and you go, you know what? I love you sitting behind me, but sheesh, you really can sing, eh? We got to learn the art of having healthy conversations. See, when Adam and Eve blew it, I put the most weight on Adam. When Adam and Eve blew it because they didn't manage the space. The distance came in the space you created. No problem with that. Didn't fill it with the right stuff. Didn't fill it with the right stuff. And because of that, mankind, Adam from that point forward, they couldn't be present with the Father, right? They had to be ousted out of the garden. God in His graciousness created another way for Him to be present. But from that point, God did His part. God said, I managed my space. I've made myself present with you again through Jesus. But mankind since that day has still struggled to deal with their junk to enter into that presence. Struggle to maintain presence because we don't know how to manage our space. Maybe you're here tonight and you haven't managed your space well. It's okay. It's not a lost cause. It's a beautiful word called grace. It's okay. Tonight's the night we learn how. We start dealing with some spaces in our life. Maybe you're here tonight and there's some difficult things happening right now. There's some difficult situations. I don't know how to navigate. This is a circumstance beyond my control. Valid. How are you navigating you in that space? How are you navigating you? Don't give in to the fear, the doubt, the criticism, the hurt, the pain. Don't give in to that. How are you navigating your space? Manage that well. Process things well. You need to sit and chat with someone. You need prayer. We need to engage some stuff. Which Jesus do you need in this moment for your context? Maybe your marriage is struggling. You need Jesus, the restorer. Maybe you're struggling physically. You need Jesus, the healer. Maybe you're struggling in provision. We need Jesus, the provider. Which Jesus, if I can phrase it that way, knowing there's only one, which Jesus, which face of Jesus are you needing tonight? And which face of Jesus do you need to become to those around you to manage your space well?